So, how did I get into this lock? How did I get into dirt biking or enduro riding? I started as a street rider at 16, and I didn't start enduro riding till 2012. It's a long story, and during this trip I'll tell you about it. Just left my house and I'm straight onto the dirt trails. I love enduro riding. Doing what I love to do. I started doing this in 2012. I would say I'm a very raw beginner intermediate, so early intermediate stage. Not a beginner anymore, but definitely not a pro. I came to it from being a street rider all my life. I was 16 and I had a GT125 Suzuki in England. Oh my god, I wanted that bike so badly. And I bought that and graduated up to a KH400 triple, which is the sweetest sounding two-stroke you have ever heard in your life. But the frame was a shocker. Over 80 or 90 miles an hour. I think it was called the Widowmaker. The old H2 was the 750 version of it, which was an absolute nightmare. Same frame, they put a 750 two-stroke in it. I digress, but needless to say, it was an absolute Widowmaker. So I sold that and ended up with a RDLC 350 by Yamaha. Beautiful bike, loved it. Peaky as hell. You downshift and it would still go fast. Been through all sorts of bikes. Moved to Canada. Carried on my road riding, I should say. And met a really good friend called Ryan. And Ryan was a enduro or dirt bike rider. He had ridden street bikes, but he'd come from an enduro background. He worked on a farm in the desert part of BC, British Columbia, called Ashcroft. But when I met him, he's always told me to get on a dirt bike. Get on a dirt bike. You're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. I was absolutely petrified of even looking at them. Couldn't understand what the fuss was about. Certainly couldn't understand why they were so expensive compared with a street bike. I mean, a street bike looks so much more. A dirt bike was, what is there to it, right? So anyway, eventually he got me out on a little 125, and I had an absolute blast. I then went out and bought myself a DR650, which was perhaps a bit of an oversight, but nevertheless I learned on the DR650 and took it off-road all the time. Trails like this and single track as well. Big heavy beast, nice and grunty. Learned on that. I remember the first ride I went out on, I was absolutely shocked. The thing moved around underneath me like all dirt bikes do on the rolly pebbles and the gravel and the dirt, and I barely got out of first gear on it. I was absolutely petrified of it. Being a street bike rider and used to stability, getting onto that dirt bike and riding on the dirt roads and feeling that thing come alive underneath me, move around with its own sort of its own accord, was not something I was thrilled about. And so consequently, Ryan stopped me after about half an hour and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Get off your bum, stand on the pegs, crouch slightly forward, grip the tank, and let the bike work underneath you. Let it do its thing. It will keep you up. You don't have to worry. Light touch on the handlebars. If things go a little hairy, loosen your grip, don't tighten it. Use your knees on the tank and keep your weight on the pegs. If you're going slow over horrible terrain, then sure, sit down and paddle with your legs if you need to. But eventually you should learn to do it on your feet." And with that sage advice, steadily over time, I have got better and better. I'm now what I would call a low intermediate, and nothing special, that's for sure. But what it has done is made me a much better street rider. I love the bike moving underneath me like that. So this is a fairly challenging section here with what's called rock crush, and there's nasty bits everywhere. But the bike, if you let it move around underneath you, keep some speed up, it will find its way through there no matter what. The suspension will do its work, and off it goes. Now, when I first learned, I would have crept over that and probably fallen over. I was going so slowly. If you want to know what it's like to transition to dirt from a street bike perspective, I recommend a good video by the Missenden Flyer. He's a motor vlogger, very well known. I'm sure you do know him. Excellent motor vlogger. Does lots of reviews, etc. One of them, he did a trip to Spain. I think someone invited him there. Bit of an advertising, I think. And he went down there and he did a few of the roads in southern Spain in January, I think, January this year. So if you look back in the archives to January this year, you'll see it. And he has a morning on dirt bikes. And it just took me back listening to him go through the trials and tribulations of someone who gets on a dirt bike for the first time, having ridden street most of their life, and who is not used to the effort. I mean, it keeps you fit. You will break into a sweat doing this, and you will understand why the helmets are so well vented and why they wear goggles. Because you're perspiring, you're working out. This is a workout, and it doesn't have to be a seriously hard one. You keep it within your tolerance level, but it's a workout nevertheless. And there will be times, especially the slower technical, not the speed. This is fairly easy, but the slower technical trails, you will get a little on the sweaty side. And I think he found that, and then in the afternoon he went on the GS, big GS 1200. No matter what anyone says, you're not going to convince me any of those great big bikes are a dirt bike. I mean, I've got a V-Strom 1000, which is supposed to be a dirt bike, and once you get on something like this, you will just shake your head and laugh. It's not comparable at all. They allow you to go in places like this, but you got to be very careful. You drop those things, there's a lot of damage to you and the bike. But it's beautiful. It's like riding a magic carpet ride. It really is. The suspension on these things is shocking how good it is. It soaks up all but the largest of bumps. You wouldn't know you're there. It's so rewarding. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
And if you enjoyed that, don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Thanks very much for listening, folks. Blue Marble Rider, out.